Good evening, everybody. Tonight we are making broccoli cheddar soup. I harvested this monster head of broccoli out in the garden today that is about 4 or 5 days past its prime. I've still been sick, recovering from COVID, and so a few things in the garden have kind of gotten away from me. And so this is not ideal. You can see how it's starting to open up, wants to go to flower. That's not perfect. However, it's going to be totally fine in a soup because we're just going to puree it up. It's not going to matter. It's probably slightly stronger than it would have been. Honestly, totally fine. And it's going to be a little more fibrous because that tends to be what happens when things get to this point. But yeah, flavor's fine. And so I'm just going to chop this bad boy up and make a soup out of it. The recipe that I'm following is actually for a cauliflower cheddar soup. And so this works with cauliflower. But I'm going to do it with broccoli instead because this is what I have on hand and I'm sure it's going to be just fine. And my original great love for broccoli came from eating it with cheese sauce over the top, so paying homage to my childhood. And I think the recipe calls for 4 cups. I'm just going to use this whole thing just because I've already got 2 other heads of broccoli in my fridge that I need to do something with. So I would rather use this up, so a little extra broccoli is not going to be a bad thing. A little extra nutrition. So the way this recipe works is you saute a bit of onion or leek or shallot, in my case onion, in some oil, and then add the veg in some milk and cook it down until it's soft, along with some herbs and spices, and then you puree it. I'm going to use an inversion blender rather than taking it out and putting it in a regular blender. I hate blending hot liquids in a blender, so I'm just going to use my stick blender instead. And then at the end, once everything is finished, you add in the cheese just until it's melted. And it should be just lovely. That's a little bit aphidy. We'll just skip that bit. I've been surprised. I really haven't had a lot of issue with bugs on this crop. I'm gardening in a new place with this particular bed, and I don't think the pests have found it yet. And so there's a little bit of aphids on that piece that I just cut out of there, but that's the first mess I've seen. I do know that my kale is starting to get aphids out there, and I need to go do some dirty work on that. One of the other recipes I have called for a potato. I decided I'm not going to do that, so ignore that potato. I'm looking for about 3/4 of a cup of onion. We'll start out with this and see where we end up. And because this is all going to get pureed, I'm really not concerned with perfect dice here. I just need to get it in the pan and have it be small enough that when it does get hit with that stick blender that it's going to break down. That looks like about 3/4 of a cup. I think we're good there. I think the original recipe called for butter. I'm going to use ghee just because butter burns and ghee doesn't. Ghee is just clarified butter. And I make my own. It's very easy to make. Perhaps I'll do a little ghee and a little bit of olive oil. I love this pot. This is a stub, which is similar to Le Creuset. And there's raging debates online about which one is better. And I've always wanted a high-end cast iron ceramic pot. And I used just a Lodge, makes a really nice one that's about 50 or 60 bucks. And I used that for years and years. Not quite as good. The coating on the bottom was starting to get really messed up. And so I decided to splurge for myself this last Christmas and bought this pot. But I got it on eBay, and it was a Williams-Sonoma clearance. So it had been a display model at Williams-Sonoma, and then somebody bought it and was reselling it, and so it didn't have the original box, and because of that, it was probably at least a third less than what I would have paid for it brand new, and it is perfect. I love the color, and so I'm just kind of tickled every time I get to cook in it. All right, I'm gonna add a pinch of salt there. I need to refill my salt cellar. And actually, I think I'm gonna move over. This is a really big burner. It tends to be pretty hot. I'm gonna move over to this one where it's slightly smaller so that I don't burn the onions while I'm getting everything else together. So I'm gonna saute those, and I'm gonna shred up the cheese while I'm doing that. And obviously I could hand shred this cheese with a box grater, but I'm still not feeling great. And that's why I have these tools, so I'm just gonna use my food processor to shred the cheese. And this is about 6 ounces. The recipe calls for 1.5 cups of cheese. 4 ounces of regular cheese comes out to about 1 cup by the time it's shredded. So that's an easy, if you're ever wanting to do things by weight instead of volume. Man, that's loud. I mentioned in a previous video, I don't love this food processor. This is part of why I'm getting this kind of stuff, but I can just shred that with my knife and it will be fine. But that should not be happening. The original recipe calls for, ouch. One of the recipes I have calls for veggie stock. You could totally do that way. I think the one with the potato was with veggie stock, and so they were trying to maybe make it vegan. But I want this to be creamy, although it doesn't make any sense that it was vegan because it had cheese in it, so that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they were doing it that way. But I'm gonna need some milk to go in that too. And as long as these are kind of cubed up, they will melt, which is all I'm really worried about. Boy, I tell you, I am ready to be done with COVID. I have been sick since the 11th of June, and it is now the 25th, 26th, so well over 2 weeks. So yeah, it's been a long road, and I'm pretty good in the mornings, and then by late in the day, I'm just really tired. So I took a nap earlier, which is why I have enough energy to get up and make myself this soup. Let's see, I need 2½ cups of milk. So this is thickened with flour as the starch. And that's fine. Here's a good trick. If you're short on milk, I don't think I've got 2½ cups of milk in here. You can use evaporated milk. It's a really nice way to make a soup creamy without adding a whole lot of calories. And since I have this on hand, I'm just gonna substitute this for some of that dairy. All right, hopefully there's enough in there to do the other ½ cup that I need. This is our giant recycling pile that only gets taken out of the house about once a week. All right, I'm getting a tiny bit of browning on here. I'm not worried about that. My heat's probably just a hair high, but those are good enough. That's good. Caramelized onion is flavor, so I'm not too worried about it. Add in my broccoli. Add in my milk. Oh, this is milk and water, so that's convenient. It didn't seem like enough liquid. We are on a well, and while our well water has been tested and it's safe to drink, it does have a little bit of nitrate in it that's below the EPA's limit. Because of that, we have a filter on it. And so for drinking and cooking, we use it's a reverse osmosis filter, just because we can. But we didn't have it for the first 5 or 6 years we lived here. Our well water is full of minerals. We have so many minerals. Not sure what's happening with that little bit, but I'm going to take it off. Give this a good stir. Add some spices, bring it up to a boil. This is a really simple soup, and it's so good. It's really easy. And I'll eat this for lunch for like the rest of the week. We'll have it for dinner tonight. I need a bay leaf. I actually have a bay leaf tree that lives out on my front porch. So these are homegrown bay leaves, which is really fun, but they're not always very big, and so I'm going to put a couple in there. A teaspoon of salt. And this is just sea salt, which is kind of my standard cooking salt if I'm not using kosher. This salt container is funny. It's an old fresh dressing container that I bought at a grocery store. Can't even read what that says anymore. Anyway, and then used it, just recycling, used it as a salt jar. And I've been using the same salt jar like this for over 20 years. And at this point, I'm superstitious about it. Like, I think if I broke it, like, bad things would happen in the world, because it's so funny that I've had it for so long and that I've never actually broken it. So that's my ridiculous salt container, but it works. Very little actual spices go into this. It's very simple. Mostly you're getting the flavor from the cheese and the broccoli, which is what you want. If you wanted to play with herbs in this, I'm sure that you could play around and add some things. It occurs to me that thyme would be good. I'm a huge fan of thyme in just about everything. So a sprinkle of thyme would be lovely. But I'm just going to leave it old school. Okay, we're going to put the lid on. If I can figure out where I put it. There it is. Put the lid on. We're going to bring our temperature way down so we don't scorch that milk. And we are going to cook this for, it says 8 minutes. Yeah, that sounds about right. All right, we'll be back in 8 minutes. All right, so our timer's just gone off. And I think I had the heat a little too low, so I don't think this is quite ready. Basically, you want to be able to poke these broccoli pieces and have them have practically no resistance. Yeah, we're definitely not cooked yet. I really needed to let that come up to a full boil before I walked away from it, and I didn't. So we're gonna give it a few more minutes. Now we're starting to get some boilage. So do as I say, not as I do. Bring your pot to a full boil before you put the lid on and start timing. I'm gonna give that another 8 minutes or so. And honestly, you can't really overcook this, so it's not like it's gonna become mush, because we're gonna mush it out anyway. All right. Back in another 8. All right, let's see how this is looking. Ah, it looks better. And this original recipe was written for cauliflower, which is possible that cauliflower cooks faster. So just, you know, use your judgment. You see how easy that went through there? Yeah, I think those are good. Okay. So if you're going to blend something that has bay leaves in it, pick the bay leaves out first, because little chunks of bay leaf are not all that tasty. I've done that before where I've forgotten to fish them out. And they do blend down, but they're in there and it's a little gritty. There's 2. I feel like there was a third one. There it is. All right. I'm gonna turn my heat off. And stick blenders, you know, it's kind of a luxury. If you have a regular blender, you can get away with not having one. They're not, depending on the quality, they're not super inexpensive. But they're also not super expensive. And honestly, if you just want to try one and see if you're going to use it, they are, I see them all the time at thrift stores. And so you can just buy one at a thrift store. If you're doing that, look closely at the seals. The newer ones in the stick, there'll be a seal at the bottom. There will not be a seal at the top. That's what you want, because no matter how well designed they are, that seal at the bottom is going to fail, and some of the liquid is going to get into that shaft. And if there's a seal at the top, it's very, very hard to clean it out. And you don't really want to be buying somebody else's old dinner at a thrift store. But if you're looking for that and it works, and the seal on the bottom looks good, it's an inexpensive way to try them out. I'm a soap maker, and it is essential to soap making, and so it's a great way for soap makers to get started with stick blenders, is to just buy one at a thrift store. So I have a ridiculous amount of stick blenders because of all the soap making that I do. mind if there's a little bit of chunk in here. I'm not trying to make this silky smooth. I just don't want there to be any big pieces of broccoli left. The other thing I can do here is, this has high and low, so I'll turn it up. Woo! Alright, that looks good enough. Look at that green soup. Yum. And I like to just, these things are kind of messy. And also because I'm a soap maker, it's just fixed pattern to rinse them first thing. So I always rinse them right away. Okay, so the next ingredient in this is that other half a cup of milk with 3 tablespoons of flour mixed into it, just regular all-purpose flour. If you were trying to make this gluten-free, you could certainly use cornstarch or tapioca starch, or maybe even potato starch, just any other kind of starch that wasn't flour-based. I don't have any issue in this particular case with the gluten, so I'm gonna go ahead and follow the original recipe. I'm just trying to make sure there aren't any big chunks, because that's gross. All right. Yeah, that looks good. We're just going to bring this back to a boil until it noticeably thickens up. Get this stuff out of here while we're... It's hard to believe those bay leaves actually had any impact, given what a short time they were in there. I've seen some YouTubers and other people do tests where they've done the exact same recipe with and without the bay leaf, just to see if they could actually discern a difference. And you can. It's one of those things where you can't put your finger on why, but the one with the bay leaf tastes better. So it's a subtle thing, but it's worth doing. But yeah, 10 minutes of bay leaf doesn't seem like it's going to have a big impact. Soap in my soup. So the other recipe I have for broccoli cheese soup, is potato and vegetable broth based, and then it uses gorgonzola, so it's a strong cheese, and I'm sure it's utterly delightful, but I didn't have any gorgonzola, and so I started thinking I would make that but use cheddar, and then I was like, why don't I just make the cauliflower cheddar soup but use broccoli instead, because I know I like this. I make this all the time in the winter with cauliflower. The other thing is this works great with frozen broccoli, and so you can blanch and freeze broccoli for later and use it in this soup in the wintertime. It's not really soup season in June. We just passed the first day of summer, but because I'm still not feeling well, it seems like a good comfort food right now. Normally I do not make soup this time of year. Basically, you just want to cook this long enough that those flour starch molecules have a chance to thicken things a bit, and also to cook out any raw flour flavor that you're getting. So it helps if you let it cook for a minute. I think we're probably about there. All right, I'm going to turn the heat off. And then literally, cheese sauce seems so exotic and French and fancy, doesn't it? And the reality is, it's so easy. There's a lot of different ways to make it, but occasionally I make homemade mac and cheese, and I'm always surprised at how simple and easy it is. It's just melting cheese into stock. Not complicated. See how that just almost disappeared? And you do this in batches. You don't want to just dump all the cheese in there, because then you'll just have a big melty wad that's hard to stir in. And it does need to be shredded or small cubes so that there's a lot of surface area. If you threw in, 1-inch cubes, you're going to have a really hard time getting those to dissolve into the sauce. So there's a reason they call for shredded. So fiddly with these kind of things. I want every last little bit out. I'm sure there are viewers who are watching me who are like, stop, put it down. And then there are people who totally get that and are the same way. You are my people. Right. I'm not seeing like strings of cheese on my whisk, which is a good sign. Let's taste this for seasoning. I'm sure I could use some pepper. Yeah, that's lovely. It feels like I feel like it needs a tiny bit more salt. Since I need to fill my salt cellar anyway, I'm just gonna get this out. So anybody who's an Alton Brown Good Eats fan will recognize this salt cellar. He uses it on his show. And many, many years ago, he had a website where you could buy these. And I think you can still buy them on his website, although the website has since been revamped. But it's a really nice little salt cellar. I really like it. I have one for salt and one for sugar. And then I bought a set of 3, and so I gave the third one to a girlfriend of mine. And then this calls for a little bit of lemon juice just to brighten it up. I'm a little concerned that lemon juice is going to make this cheese sauce split, but I'm going to trust that they're not going to steer me wrong. I'm not going to use that same spoon since I'm still not feeling great. Even though it's just my husband and I, and he has COVID as well, so we're not at risk of infecting each other. Yeah, that's good. That's very comforting. I am going to put just a little bit of calls for a tablespoon of lemon juice, so I'm not going to squeeze this very hard. I'm just going to do a tiny bit. Not the juiciest lemon in the world either. Sometimes an acid will make dairy curdle. So So that was my worry there, but I think there's enough starch with the flour that it's holding it together. All right, spoon number 3. Thank God we have a dishwasher. Yep. Sometimes when you taste something and you're like, this just tastes kind of meh, it's almost always acid is what it needs. And like, this doesn't taste lemony. I can't even tell there's lemon juice in this, but it just tastes better. It's amazing how that works. And so, I mean, anytime you're like eating something and you're like, I'm not excited about this, go through your head and ask yourself, does it need acid or does it need salt? A lot of times salt will also make a huge difference in terms of balancing something. All right, I think we're good. And this whole recipe came together in probably less than 20 minutes. And was a great use of that giant broccoli. And I will grow broccoli again in the fall. So I'll have a fall crop of broccoli as well. So I'm gonna blanch and freeze some of the extra that I have. But I will have more coming as well. So, and honestly, that's really only gonna make about 4 servings. So what a great way to get your vegetables. That one can be mine. Do this one far side for my husband. There you go, broccoli cheddar soup with a giant, slightly over mature head of broccoli. 20-minute dinner, perfect.